New York Giants general manager Joe Schoen spoke to the media at the Combine Tuesday morning. I'll tell you what he had to say and give you my thoughts about it. Coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network. And a special hello and shout out to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Welcome. You are all appreciated and loved by yours truly. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we heard from General Manager Joe Schoen at the Combine. Schoen running his usual 15-minute podium session. He also ran a backroom session, as we call it, where basically he breaks off and he talks to the beat writers separately from the podium, where anybody can kind of jump in. And I have some takeaways from what Schoen had to say. Now, I'm not going to focus so much on what he had to say. I mean, I'll give you a recap of that, but I want to focus more on what I think it means for the team in the long term. So again, welcome on in. Let's get started because I've got a long list that I have to cover here with you guys. Let's start things off with Daniel Jones. Now, Schoen provided an update on Daniel Jones's recovery. He said that Jones a couple weeks ago started throwing from a stationary position, could be ready to do 7x7 in individuals by the spring OTAs. And the anticipation is that he should be ready for training camp, although I don't think he plays in the preseason regardless. The key takeaway, though, is that they still believe in him. Schoen did not give a reason for it. And I want to talk about, I want to start there because that was a big question that I know I had. You know, why do you still believe in him? And it wasn't so much an answer that he didn't give, because, unfortunately there wasn't a follow-up why you still believe in it. But there was another question asked of Schoen later on in one of his other media interviews. I think it was with Pro Football Talk, if I'm not mistaken. And basically he said something to the effect of, it's about the personality in a quarterback. When he was talking about quarterbacks and what they look for and everything like that, he was asked specifically, and I apologize, it was with Giants.com, not Pro Football Talk, but he was talking about, when you get with these quarterbacks, and he's talking about the college kids, you want to really get to know them. You want to get to know their demeanor. Can they handle the pressure that comes with playing in different markets, specifically the New York market? And I'm reminded of a story happened years ago when the Giants were scouting Eli Manning, and how Ernie Accorsi knew that Eli Manning was going to be successful in New York. And that story goes as follows. Accorsi had gone down to Eli Manning's pro day, and J.P. Losman, who was one of the quarterbacks in that draft class, showed up. And he was a little more highly touted than Eli. And Peyton Manning, as the story goes, Peyton Manning was down there, and he got all upset that J.P. Losman showed up and, threw a temper tantrum from what I understand. And then you had Eli, who basically just kind of shrugged it off and said, it is what it is, and went and did his thing and had his workout and did well in his workout. And of course, he told me from my book, The Big 50 Men and Moments That Made the New York Giants, that he knew right then and there that Eli was going to be a good fit for the New York market. Now, it's interesting because, as you guys know, I'm a bit of a Giants historian. I've covered this team for over 30 years. I watched them going back to 1979. The first year I really watched them when Phil Simms came in. And let's forget a moment about the ups and downs of Daniel Jones and how he regressed and should they move on from him. I just want to, mention this story real quick because I kind of see some similarities here. When Phil Simms was drafted in 1979, there were some question marks about him. Did he have what it takes to survive in the New York market? And he came in and, Simms was kind of, initially a quiet kid, but very cocky, very confident. And you look at what he went through the first few years of his career, injuries. He had, basically a crappy offensive line. He didn't have good receivers. The running game wasn't really good. There was a change in coaching staffs. He went from Ray Perkins to Bill Parcells, early in his career. All the things that Daniel Jones has kind of gone through. Now, the difference is Simms, of course, pulled it all together, had a good stretch there for the Giants, and morphed into a good quarterback. Daniel Jones has been with the team now for 5 seasons, going into year 6. And I know we're still asking questions about him and can he be the guy? But you know what? You almost see the similarities with Simms as far as the early part. Jones, of course, injury plague, bad offensive line, hasn't had a number one receiver, has had a running game, which Simms really didn't have. And then, of course, the constant turnover with the coaching staff. So in thinking about why Joe Schoen can get up there and say to the media with a straight face that I still believe in Daniel Jones, I can't help but wonder if that had something to do with it. And I say that because remember, Joe Schoen for a while worked under Bill Parcells. So he had that connection. And Bill Parcells, of course, was there in the early years of Simms's career when, Simms initially people thought he was going to be a bust, and then he went on to be a solid quarterback for the team. So I wonder if that's why the team is still believing in him. Now, that being said, Shane said that they're not necessarily, putting so much stock into Daniel Jones that they're not going to draft or they're not going to add to the quarterback room. He's actually told Daniel that, look, because of the injury situation, we've got to add here. And they haven't ruled out Tyrod Taylor, by the way. I think Shane said he was going to talk to Tyrod's representatives at the combine. So that being said, the impression I got with regards to the quarterback, I don't think Joe Schoen is going to move up to draft a quarterback. I know that, Daniel Jeremiah spoke about, possibly trading up and how that could still be in play. But Joe Schoen said something interesting. And again, this is with, he spoke to Pro Football Talk and on Giants.com. So this was 2 separate interviews. But he basically said, you've got to know that the guy can handle the pressure. And, the way you do that, everybody can look at the tape. Everybody can fall in love with the tape and say, oh, Drake May looks awesome. Or, oh, Caleb Williams is the next Patrick Mahomes. But unless you spend time with the guy and you really get inside his head, how does he handle adversity? How does he handle, does he run to social media? Does he, whine to the press? How does he handle all that? And, that's something that Shane said when they were in Buffalo, when they were scouting Josh Allen. They spent a lot of time with him to really get inside his head and learn, just how steely his resolve was. And that's makes me think that, the Giants may not go quarterback. They may not trade up. Shane said that it's a strong quarterback class, that there are guys that you could probably get on day 2. And, look, I would love it if they got a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels. I don't think they're going to trade up to do it. They've got too many needs. But again, Shane also said that depending on how free agency goes, that could potentially set the table for what they do. But I'm still sticking with receiver, folks. I know a lot of you guys out there probably would like to see the Giants move on from Daniel Jones. And for the record, I'm not backtracking on my opinion of Daniel Jones. I still say after, 6 years or whatever it's been, that I haven't seen a whole lot to convince me that he can be the guy moving forward. There are still things in his game that bother me. The slow processing time, the missing wide receivers that are wide open down the field, that sort of thing. But in looking at it from Shane and the Giants' perspective, that's why I believe that the New York Giants still think that Daniel Jones can make this work. And if he doesn't, well, you've got the escape hatch that they will use. And, they won't hesitate. That's why the escape hatch was put in there. If Jones does work out and shows that he can be the quarterback that he was in 2022, which was a lot better than what we saw last year in 6 games, then the Giants have some options available the following year. They could potentially look to trade, the draft pick if they take a second-round draft pick, similar to what, the 49ers did with trading Trey Lance. They could maybe look to move on from Daniel Jones if they decide that a rookie that they draft is a better option. They will have options available to them, but it all is contingent, obviously, on Daniel Jones coming in and doing his part. That's the unknown factor. Can he do it? Or is he just going to revert back to what we have seen in most of his career, which is basically an uncertain, uncomfortable quarterback? Time will only tell. So, all right, coming up next, Saquon, Xavier, McKinney. Let's talk about them right after this. Hey, Giant fans, football season is officially in the books, but that doesn't mean the excitement of betting on sports is over. Right now, you can get buckets when you place your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find your assigned therapist isn't a match, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Trena, and we are talking Joe Schoen's pressers. And he had a lot to say, a lot of interesting stuff to say. I know, on the surface, it looked like he didn't say much, but if you use your logic and your deductive reasoning, you can kind of read between the lines as to how things are going to potentially go. And in this segment, I want to talk about Saquan Barkley and Xavier McKinney, two of the Giants' biggest looming free agents. Now, as expected, Shane did not have an update. He basically said the plan was for this week to talk to Barkley's representative and McKinney's representative. So let's start with Barkley. Shane was very, very complimentary of Barkley's new agent, Ed Berry of CAA. Talked about how he's a good man, hard worker, etc. He mentioned how the Giants still want Saquon to be a part of their team. Both sides, of course, want each other. Saquon has said in the past that he would like to be a Giant for life. And Shane also said he hasn't ruled out using the franchise tag on Saquon. It's probably unlikely that he uses it, but he hasn't ruled it out. So let's talk a little bit about, where things are there. I've mentioned in the past that the running back market's a little bit deeper this year than it was last year when you had Josh Jacobs was franchise tag. Derrick Henry was under contract at the time. You had Tony Pollard of Dallas. He got the tag. Saquon got the tag. So the market was kind of thin. This year, that is not the case. And when the market favors teams, when they have their pick of the litter, so to speak, you can probably keep the cost of acquiring a player, especially at a position where the the league seems to be devaluing it a little bit, you'll probably keep that down. So, I still think what the Giants are probably going to do is they're going to not tag Barkley, but they're going to say, look, come back to us with any offers you get and give us a chance to match. I'm guessing that the Giants don't think that Saquon's going to find, that huge payday that maybe he would like. Now, I mentioned that Shane said he did not rule out the franchise tag for Saquon. Here's the scenario in which I think they could potentially use the franchise tag. So let's say, first off, let's point out that the deadline to use the franchise tag is March 5th. If negotiations progress with Saquon's agent, but they don't quite wrap it up by March 5th, then if you're Shane, you say, okay, you know what? We're almost done. We've got a little bit more talking to do, but let's use the tag as a placeholder. So right off the bat, you use the tag, 11.9 million comes off your salary cap. But here's the thing, folks. That is as of March 5th. Teams have got to get their cap house in order by March 13th, which is the start of the new league year. So that basically gives a team like the Giants a whole week to wrap up Saquon's contract negotiations. In the meantime, it also keeps other teams away from potentially coming in and taking him, and stealing him from out from under the Giants. So assuming the Giants, were to find themselves in that situation and they don't get the deal wrapped up with Saquon until the following week, just before the start of the tampering period, or maybe even during the tampering period, they can then, by the time the league year starts off, what happens then is if they sign Saquon to a new deal, then they get a cap credit back for whatever Saquon's for the franchise tag minus the new number of Saquon's first year deal. Now, do I think the Giants should re-sign Saquon? I've said in the past I wouldn't hate it if they did, but as I said on yesterday's show, the Giants have to ask themselves what kind of offense do they want to run and how much do they want to devote to, say, a running back. You get the feeling that the Giants want to be more of a vertical offense, more of a passing offense. Saquon can help in that regard, but you don't want to tie up big money, certainly not 11 million plus in a running back. That's not going to do you any good. Even if your intention is to get a receiver in the draft on a rookie deal, it's still not any good. So that's kind of where they're at with Saquon. Now with Xavier McKinney, let's talk about him real quick. Xavier McKinney's agent is coming into town on Friday, according to Joe Schoen. So they'll sit down, they'll talk. He did mention that, Schoen, that is, mentioned that they had a couple of conversations with Xavier, who, by the way, has been putting out some cryptic tweets about wanting to go where you're appreciated, not where you're needed, or something to that effect. I mean, Xavier has been very active on social media, and, I've kind of given up trying to figure out what he means with stuff. It's just, it is what it is with him. But the Giants do want him back. And that stands to reason. He's 24 years old. He played every snap last year. He was, he started off slow, but he got better as the year went on. And he's a good safety. He's versatile. He's exactly what new defensive coordinator Shane Bowen is maybe looking for in a player on defense. So, Shane has said in the past that you come in and the way you build a roster is you draft, you develop, and you retain. To let Xavier McKinney walk out the door, that goes against what Shane is preaching. So in that case, with the transition tag, makes sense for him. Now, he wasn't asked about that. Shane wasn't. But yeah, you could see an instance where it would make sense to use a transition tag if you don't end up using the franchise tag on Saquon, which is why I don't think, by the way, they're going to use the franchise tag on him at all. I think they're going to just have that handshake deal, even though, I know that the Giants probably don't want Saquon to walk out the door for nothing. But anyway, with McKinney, you basically say, okay, we're going to use the transition tag. You're still free to go out and solicit offers from other teams. You can sign an offer sheet, but we are guaranteed the opportunity to match it. All right. I don't know that maybe they have a handshake deal in place with McKinney to allow them to match the offer. I'd like to think that there would be, because look, Joe Schoen has spent time trying to build up goodwill with the player. You go back to when McKinney had the hand injury, they could have docked him for his signing bonus. They could have, asked for money back because he basically, did something that you could argue violated his contract by putting himself in harm's way. And the Giants didn't do that. So that's got to count for something, you would think, in the negotiations. And whether it does or doesn't, we'll find out, obviously, when McKinney starts, looking around. But, McKinney wants to be paid. That much we know. What he thinks he's worth, what the Giants thinks he's worth, oftentimes the two don't jive. They never do. The player always thinks he's worth more than what the team does. So it's going to be interesting to see what number he actually comes in on. The safety market is a little thinner than the running back market, but not as thin to where, McKinney going out there is going to think, okay, I'm going to be the top dog. I'm going to get the top amount. He's going to be amongst maybe the top 5 highest paid. Will he be number 1? I'm not so sure he will. So we'll have to see if that's how it plays out. But the feeling, to wrap up on this segment, I do think they get something done with Saquon at a reasonable number. I think, Saquon is smart enough to know that if he stays in New York, the marketing opportunities that he has are going to continue to flow, which will help set him up for financial security. The football contract, unfortunately, that ship might have sailed with him getting another year older with more injuries, and plus with his previous agent totally kind of misreading the room and not taking advantage of, the offers that were on the table last year. There were 3 different offers, and I just don't see those offers coming back to the table. They ranged, I think, anywhere from, I want to say 11 million APY to up to 14 APY. And, APY, as I've said many times before, doesn't mean anything. It's the guaranteed money, but I still say guaranteed money for Saquon. I'm going 3 years, 15 million guaranteed. And I think it's going to be around a $30 million type of deal with incentives. So, all right, coming up next, coaching. We have headset gate and some other thoughts on coaching. So that's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We're talking Joe Schoen, press briefing takeaways. And one of the items that Schoen discussed during his backroom session with the media, actually it was just away from all the podium action. We call it the back room. He talked about the coaching staff. And one of the, questions that popped up was the decision that was reported by the Daily News, after the season by Schoen to listen in on the headset. What brought that on? Does that mean that he had concern about Brian Daboll and his communication? And basically, for the timing, Schoen admitted that he did jump on the headset when the Giants played Washington. I think it was the second game, but not because there was concern, or so he says, about Brian Daboll and how he was communicating with the staff, but more so because at FedEx Field, the seating for the media and for visiting dignitaries is not very good. You're sitting in the end zone, so a lot of times you can't see the other end of the field as to what's going on. Whereas in most stadiums, you're kind of like along the sideline and you have a better sight view. So Schoen said he put the headset on because it was something he always wanted to do. And he dispelled the fact that, oh, it didn't matter that they were 2-8 at the time. He would have done it if they were 9-0, if that were the case. And he wanted to listen in and be able to, go back to ownership and answer questions about, if this guy screwed up or what happened on this play and whatnot. So he said basically, it had nothing to do with the concerns about Dable and how he was talking to the staff or treating the staff. You can believe that if you want. I have no reason to believe that Shane is not telling the truth, but I don't know, just the whole timing of the whole thing, because if you go back to the Daily News report, apparently there were some heated exchanges between Dable and Wink Martindale. And actually, if I remember correctly, the sideline reporter for, I think it was Fox Sports, they were broadcasting the game, put something out there about, there being a heated discussion between Dable and Wink Martindale at the time. So, look, I don't necessarily think that Shane jumped on the headset because, somebody had to be the adult and settle things between, the two alpha males that are Brian Dable and Wink Martindale. I don't think that's the reason, but you'd want to, I think, have an idea what's going on. Maybe the play calling, maybe there was something that Shane felt that, if he needed to be a sounding board or give advice, if he was aware of how things were going, maybe he could give that kind of input. So he kind of downplayed it. And again, I have no reason to say that that's the reason why he did it, or that's not what happened or whatever. But I just found it kind of interesting because the timing is just kind of weird. If you're that interested in knowing what's going on and you want to explain to your boss what's happening, why not do it sooner? And then why stop after, he said that he was superstitious and he did it for the 3 games, the 3-game win streak, and then he stopped after the 3 games. So, when supposedly when you're winning, things are going a little bit better. Maybe there's not as much heated conversations going on the sideline. So I really don't know what to make of that. I mean, I don't want to sit here and call anybody a liar or anything like that, but I just found the whole thing kind of weird. Just the timing, the explanation and whatnot. And I'll leave it up to you to make of it what you will. But I don't know. To me, it's just the whole thing is a weird situation. One last point I want to mention from that backroom session. Shane was asked about Brian Dable potentially calling plays this year. Now, I have said that I believe that if the Giants draft a young quarterback, Dable will take over the play calling. He will want to have a big hand in the development of that young signal caller. Mike Kafka, of course, promoted getting the assistant head coaching title. So he'll presumably have some more roles, more duties on game day, some of which may preclude him from calling plays. We don't know this. No decision has been made yet, by the way. Shane said that they're still talking about it. They still haven't decided. But I could see a scenario where that ends up being the case. And Shane said, look, if that's what Dable wants to do, if he wants to call the plays, he's fine with that. It's up to him. The first year that they were there, he wasn't a big fan of Dable calling the plays because it was a new staff, new programs, new everything, get everything settled. And then, you could go back and you can tweak stuff later on in your tenure. So I think ultimately Dable's going to call the plays. I really believe that. They talked about prepping Mike Kafka to eventually be a head coach. A lot of head coaches, I don't think, call plays. There are some that do it and do it successfully. Then there are those that try to do it and aren't as successful, both, current and past. So I just have a feeling that that's the direction this is headed in. And look, Brian Dable's a good play caller. If that's what ends up happening, I'm fine with that. I really am. I mean, there were times last year that I questioned Mike Kafka's play calling decisions. How much of that was because of the personnel he had to work with versus, what was going on around him? I don't know. But if Dable ends up taking that on, and like I said, if the young quarterback starts to play, then hey, anything for success. If that makes the team better, if that makes the young quarterback better, then go for it. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Keep it here. The rest of the week, we'll have more as we get it from the Combine interviews and other good stuff coming all this week. See you then, Giant fans.